It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Daniel Brand. We're here in your beautiful apartment in Tel Aviv. And Daniel, you are the son of two unsung heroes. Your father, Joel Brand, and your mother, Hansi. And if you can tell us a little bit about the most incredible people that your parents were and the achievements that they did, because it is remarkable, it is incredible, and it's very important that we should know and appreciate.
I will try.
So we have a picture of your father and your mother. Okay, thank you so much.
Now the names are basically pronounced according to the German pronunciation, so it's not Joel, it's Joel. The letter J in Latin is J, so it is pronounced as Y. The name Hansi is a nickname, and I'm not going to mention her real name, it's too complicated for people who don't speak Hungarian. So her nickname is Hansi, written with S, not with Z, but with S. So that's just a remark.
What was her real name?
My mother's real name is like the morning star in Hungary, Hajnalka. Hajnal is the early morning. Like in Hebrew, Ayelet HaShachar, you will say. It is regarded a nice Hungarian name. Now, in the family, the names are normally, in our family, biblical names. So my name is Daniel. Normally we are saying Dani. My brother was Michael. We called him Mickey. So all we use the biblical name. My father got his name after his grandfather, who perished in Jerusalem a few months before he was born in 1906, because toward the end of in the second half of the 19th century, Joel's grandfather moved to Jerusalem and built there a synagogue and homes for his children, and passed away there in 1906, few months before my father was born, and so he got the name Joel. Both my parents came from a regular Jewish family, more or less observant, not extreme, but observant Jews. My mother, middle class. After World War I, her father lost all his savings, which were invested in Hungarian bonds, so it became zero, and the situation at home became less than middle class. My father's family was in the higher middle class. None of my parents had any specific education. They had no formal, how do you call it in English, abitur or high school, full high school degree, not to speak about university degree. Both of them were idealists that cared for people. Now that's as a beginning, and let's go toward the end of the story, and this will help us understand the other part of the story. March 1944, the German invades Hungary. Within less than 4 weeks, my father arranged a meeting with Bislitseni. Bislitseni is more or less second to Eichmann in the German establishment that was dealing with liquidating the Jewish people. Why Wislitzeny? Because Wislitzeny was the one who made 2 years earlier an agreement with the working group in Slovakia, in Bratislava, headed by Rabbi Weissmandel, and after paying him $50,000, they claim that it was only 40,000 and 10,000 was taken by the Jewish corrupt middlemen. Anyway, after $40,000 or $50,000, the deportation of Slovakian Jews were stopped for 2 years. And it was renewed only when there was a uprising against the Germans, as many Jews took part, so it collapsed, but it was after more than 2 years. Saving the Jews for 2 years is a big achievement. So the group with which my father belonged to, the Budapest Help and Assistant Refuge Committee, tried to do the same deal with the Nazis again. So they looked for that Wislitzeny, and after about 3 weeks, Yoel managed to arrange a meeting for him and for Kastner with Wislitzeny, and told him we are willing to continue. Here it's time maybe to mention that in Bratislava they also got an offer to stop all the killings for deportation of Jews in Europe for $2 to $3 million. Not a small money, but still that money that could have been raised. Of course, they couldn't get the money and nothing came out of it. So Yoel and Kastner, when they met with Wislitzeny, they offered him, we will pay the 2-3 million and you stop all the deportation. So the response was, we are willing to go into economic deal, but not on the terms as it was in Slovakia, but in new terms. So after a while, my father was summoned. It's like a court, you don't have the option to say no, to Eichmann. And after several discussions, Eichmann gave him the proposal to go abroad and tell the joint that for 10,000 trucks, the Germans are willing to release 1 million Jews. Now, the details of these Jews are minor, non-significant versions of it, but the basic of 1 million Jews, 10,000 trucks is accepted by everybody, and it has been emphasized by all people involved. So that's not under discussion. So with this offer, Yoel travels to Istanbul, which was called by the Jews at the time Kushta, that was the Jewish name of Istanbul, Kushta from Constantinople. 2 weeks or about a week or 10 days earlier, the Jewish mission in Kushta got a telegram saying that Yoel is coming with an important mission, arrange for him a visa. The answer was, Yoel shall come, Chaim is waiting for him. So in Budapest they believed Chaim is Chaim Weizmann, because it's important, but in Istanbul and Kushta they believed the local head of the mission, Chaim Barlas, is good enough. So Yoel lands in Istanbul, 19 May 44, and there is no visa. After that, that Barlas saw him in the airport and went home. According to him, he went to arrange a visa and managed to arrange for Yoel to enter the city. But in fact, he did nothing, and the one who managed to release Yoel from the airport and let him go to the town was the Nazi criminal, as you wish, as Yad Vashem call him, Bondi Gross, who was by far better person than his description in Israeli documentation. Anyway, he knew how to speak Turkish. Do you know how you arrange things in Turkish? Bakshish.
It's a bribe. But can I just mention, your father, I think, was sent on an official aeroplane.
Yes, official German aeroplane. And Chaim Barla said, he came with a German spy, known spy. Excuse me, it's a German official aeroplane. Who comes there? Of spies? Spies not, because it's too clear that he is a German representative. Nazi diplomats, Nazi diplomatic mail, no others. It's only official people, German officials, all of them, of course, Nazis. So that was not a reason, that was just a story. Earlier he claimed, yes, he had a visa, but because the people came with him, he was not let in. It's all nonsense, pure lies. No, all the history is modified to cover up the behavior of the Jewish authority in thwarting Yoel's rescue mission, which was intended to save many Jewish lives. And therefore everything is thwarted, because they thwarted this mission, starting with inviting him without a visa, and then a lot of other things. I will go to it later on, but now let's go to the beginning and what were my parents doing during the Holocaust. So as I said earlier, before we started this formal, let's say, interview, my father was born in Greater Hungary, moved to Germany at the age of about 4 or 5, returned to Hungary in 1934, was accepted there as a resident, married my mother there in 1935.
Here's a wonderful picture of your parents.
Yes, that's how they looked about a month before the marriage in a park in Buda. Now, in Budapest, both my parents were planning to go to Palestine, but they got no certificate, so they waited and waited. In the time the family grew, my brother was born, I was born, the family from Germany had to leave Germany and they all came to Hungary and they have to be financially supported. So my parents had to make their living for them and for the whole family, and they, I wouldn't say established, but they took the little workshop my mother started at the age of about 15 of knitting workshop and enlarged it and made it a very prosperous business. This business supported the family till the end of the war, even though Jews were forbidden from or prevented for keeping businesses during the Nazi period. But I'll come to it, my first man. This workshop supported the family, and also was used later for illegal refugees, for workplace and for meetings for their leadership. Everything was there. So that's the beginning, and we are now approaching 1939, 38, 39. According to American historian Braham and others, my parents were, as he called it, interested in refugee affairs, arranging all kind of underground activities in order to assisting refugees, according to Braham, after the Anschluss and the occupation of Poland, so something 38, 39. And because they met many refugees and helped them and fed them, always inviting them to dinner and so on, so they heard a lot of stories about what Germans are doing to the Jews. And I think they gave them the understanding that the Germans are very, very, very dangerous. So that's the background. Now we came to the year 1941. And just a word about the beginning of the Holocaust. The Holocaust didn't start in 1933 when the Nazis came to power. That was a persecution of Jews, went over the history for thousands of years, nothing new. It didn't start with the Nuremberg rules. It didn't start even with the occupation of Poland in 1939. The Holocaust started on 22nd June 1941. The Barbarossa, how do you say it, offensive, the attack of Germany on Russia. Why is this date marks the beginning of the Holocaust? Because the invading German forces included special SS unit mission to kill all the Jews in the occupied territory. That's how the Holocaust started.
It's the Hans group.
It
was a special group that...
It was special SS unit tasked with killing all the Jews in the occupied areas. That's the Germans. In February 1941, half a year before the Holocaust starts, a Jewish friend of my parents, Samuel Springman, heard a rumor that the Hungarian authorities are planning to deportate 100,000 Jews that have no Hungarian citizenship, what they called alien Jews, to deport them out of the territories of Hungary. He informed the Jewish authority, no one took it in seriously, and people maybe forgot it. As soon as the Germans invaded Russia, I think less than a week later, Hungary joined the war aside Germany. And within days they started implementing the plan to deport 100,000 Jews to the newly liberated areas. Now, it's not fair to blame the Hungarians that they wanted to kill all these Jews, because in June 41, or August 41 or July 41, no one had the idea that deportation means murder, because it has never happened before. The figure that the Hungarians intended to deport 100,000 Jews is also mentioned by Pinchas or Philip Freudiger in his testimony in the Eichmann trial. He mentions that the plan was to deport 100,000 Jews, or even more. Anyway, among the deportees were my mother's sister and brother-in-law. My mother has done everything to bring her sister back. The sister deported was Elizabeth or Erzsébet in Hungarian, and the brother-in-law was Lajos Stern, who was a Polish citizen. And once he's a Polish citizen, the woman goes with him. So less than 2 years ago, this book was published in America. 1941, Summer of Mass Murder, Rehearsal for the Hungarian Holocaust, by one George Eisen. And he describes this event. It is also documented by Professor Braham much earlier. Now, among the deportees were my mother's sister and brother-in-law. My mother insisted on bringing them back. My father found the Hungarian police or someone connected to the police who was willing to do it, and she paid a huge sum. How is it? Who was willing to find and bring back the two for a hefty fee. 2,000 pengu. It is many thousands of dollars. The pengu at the time was about 25 American cents, but the American dollar in 41 was about 50 or 70 dollars of today. So 10,000 pengu, you can live on it for a year. But my mother, everybody told her, you are crazy. My mother said, I will not sleep unless I know that I've done anything in my power to rescue her. So they managed to bring the two back, heard their stories, and were shocked. Other people, for example, one of the members of the Shomer HaTzair underground, his uncle was also in the deportation and also managed somehow to survive and come back, but it meant to him nothing. He didn't know that there is a Holocaust. My parents understand very well what is it, and so they made something extremely unusual. They brought the rescued brother-in-law to the Minister of Interior to tell him what happens to the deportees. And the minister was shocked and ordered to stop the deportation immediately. So that's the story. Now this story,
and that in a way saved many thousands of Jews.
At the time when the minister gave this order to stop the deportation, already 35,000 Jews were already arrested in the list to be deported, waiting for deportation, 35,000. practically less than 20,000 were deported, and 7 trains were stopped on their way to the border, 2 of them already in the border.
So, Daniel, this was one of the greatest and one of the initial rescue attempts
I think
in the
this
Shoah.
is probably the biggest success during the Shoah. Biggest success. Tens of thousands with the effort of 2 people without special connection or anything, just daring and willing to help. Now, about 2,000 from the deportees, about something around between 50 and 20,000 were deported, more between 60 and 80,000 were deported. The exact figures are not known, but about 2,000 out of them managed to come back. People like Elie Wiesel, for example, whose friend was deported, write in his book that people were sorry for the deportees, but they say, so that's what's war. That's war. When his acquaintance come back, after a year or so, survived the killings in Kamensk-Podolsk, where most of the deportees were murdered, and told the same story as my mother's brother-in-law. What Elie Wiesel write in his book, people not only refuse to believe, people refuse to listen. People didn't want to hear. All these 1,000 or 2,000 survivors spread all over Hungary and told their story. And after that, the Hungarian Jews claimed, we didn't know.
So can I just mention, because you write in your book that your mother recommended to her sister that she shouldn't appear before the authorities.
Okay, but that's not so important.
But they were law-abiding citizens and they did appear.
Yes, so that's what the most of Hungarians did, because they were law-obedient, and they didn't understood that in such times you don't have to be always law-obedient.
And she took you and your brother to a hotel and she gave you a home.
I'll go to it. I told you that according to historians, here I took from the American historian Abraham. He says, if you want to see it, that after the Anschluss and the defeat of Poland, the Brands, became particularly interested in refugee affairs, organizing a variety of rescue and relief activities. Their concern for the refugees acquired a personal tone in the summer of 41. So I told you the story of summer 41, and now we are going to the meeting with the minister. The escapees who returned to Hungary told a harrowing story of suffering and mass murder. One of the survivors, by the name of Lajos Stern, Joel Brand's brother-in-law, informed the Minister of the Interior about the details of the Kamensk-Podolsk massacres. The minister was visibly shocked and declared that he had enough of this and ordered to halt all further deportations. As I told earlier, the deportation was planned to be about 100,000 or even more. It ended in less than 20,000 because of this visit by the minister.
Actually, it saved 80,000 Jews.
Now,
Possibly.
let's look at the full picture. Nothing happens because of one ember doing one thing. There are other forces, but this was the straw that broke the camel's back. So, now this was written by the American historian Braham in Israel. And this was published by Yad Vashem. But without the researchers' knowledge, they omitted the name Layosh and the words Yoel Brand's brother-in-law. So it was just some Stern. Thousands of them existed in Hungary, and of course it has never been published in Hebrew. Only in the documentation of Yad Vashem you can hardly find it. So deliberate falsification. Now, that's why I started my research, because in 2000, when my mother passed away, I went through all her documents and recordings, and I find an interview she gave to Yad Vashem, and she told them about this event, and they said, "We don't know such thing." She said, "But it's written in the book." She said, "We know the book, but we don't know this." So I thought it must be a mistake. I had no idea that they may be falsifying deliberately. So I thought maybe Hansi, my mother was asked, "How long do you know it?" She said, "About a year." And so I said, okay, maybe there's a new edition of the book. So I realized there is really a new book, a new release. This was the interview I think was about 1995. The new book was released in 94. So I searched for it, I find a copy, and it was there. So I came to Yad Vashem to tell them. So I made an appointment with the researcher who made the interview with Hansi. When I came to the issue, he told me, "Oh, sorry, I have to go out for a few minutes." I waited more than 20 minutes, and I then went out. My wife was waiting for me. He disappeared, but she said he's sitting in the cafeteria. That's Yad Vashem. Anyway, let's continue. So, the deportation was sought, and what Braham father says, the minister was visibly shocked and declared that he had enough of this and ordered to halt all further deportations, that we said already. And here it adds, in fact, he ordered to recall 7 trains en route to the border, 2 of them already in Kölsch-Messe, that's the border station. Now, I looked for the date, when did it happen. I found in the history, in the research, only one source. Normally I prefer 2 sources at least, to be sure. I am a researcher. And so years after I wrote my book, I got a letter from a friend also from my old workplace, and he read me, "My mother was 11 years old when her family was taken by a train to the Ukraine border. It was only after I read chapter 5 of your book that I understood the unbelievable story that my mother told about how, on the way to a concentration camp in Kamensk-Podolsk on Friday, 8th of August 1941, the train stopped at the border crossing and didn't continue her way. Until the end of her life, she didn't know the reason for this. So here I had the verification that the date was 8 August.
And you got this email from...
email.
It was from Avi
Sheinkopf, also an employee of Sorek. Like he was in finance, and unlike the one who passed away,
Robert Engelman,
who was in the same group that I worked with. So you see, everything that I wrote is based on hard evidence, no stories.
And this is, we're just going to show this is the book.
No, this is not the book. The book is the Hebrew book, but he mentions.
I know, but this is the book that you wrote.
This is the book I wrote, and the Hebrew book also I wrote. Yes, it's the same, with some differences, but basically the same.
And it's all factual. It's
everything is hardly evident, documented. The letter is not there because it came later.
Okay. But just to give an example, every statement you back it up with all the references.
All references. So
you must have been delighted when you got this email.
yes, because it gave me a proof that because in the book, in the Hebrew book, I don't remember, I said that it's likely to be the 8th of August, but it's only one source. So here I have the proof that it's another source. Now, what did my parents done after this? After this, until the German occupation, they were busy helping illegal refugees in Hungary. And here I bring some historians, what they say, because the stories is published here, that was the paper on which they are published. So here is a citation from a Hungarian historian. In February 1942, refugees from Poland and Slovakia began to arrive in Hungary. Their financial support, accommodation, legalization, equipping them with appropriate documents was taken care by local Zionist activists. It's true. She adds, Joel Brandt, as his wife and his wife Hansi, were the first to help refugees to Hungary. And not Kastner, no nonsense, Joel and Hansi. No one in Israel will admit this.
And Daniel, who's the name of the person that wrote this?
Maria Schmidt. Do you read Hungarian? I have the original Hungarian. I was lucky because I had the original Hungarian, but Yad Vashem, not Yad Vashem, other research institute published a translation of this document to Hebrew. So it exists both in Hebrew and Hungarian, but not Yad Vashem, of course. So that's, as I told you, also
it's a very big thing, this, that they were the first to help the refugees.
They were the help. Also Braham says it, that they were, after the Anschluss, I can show you, would you like it in the book?
No, this is very good.
After the Anschluss, they become specifically interested in it, organizing various, he calls it underground affairs, and joined by Springmann. The Springmann I mentioned, who heard about the plan to deport 100,000 Jews, he's totally forgotten. So this was halting the deportation, and we see that other foreign researchers say that the Brands were the first to help illegal refugees in Hungary. Here I bring two testimonies taken from books written from a refugee who spent about 2 weeks in my room. And she wrote, it was in spring 42, I couldn't find out the exact date. I moved to Joel Brand's house. He and his wife did a lot to help refugees. I stayed there for about 2 weeks. Days after I left, the police came, searched, and asked about a girl who should be there.
And who writes this?
Hannah bin Nun, back there, in the book published in Israel, back there. I have it. And here is another story. Young Zionists, some of them refugees, set up in Budapest a workshop to forge documents. They obtained the first forms for their fake certificates from the owner of a printing house through Hansi, and therefore later she was arrested and captured.
And who writes this?
This Asher Cohen and many other sources. This is the only Israeli historian who asked the people themselves and researched the evidence and not took the stories of Bowers and so on. Now another refugee who went through our home, and he says, among the activists in the Tiul was the smuggling of Jews from Slovakia, from Poland and Slovakia, normally through Slovakia, to Hungary, which was relatively safe. Among the activists in the Tiul smuggling organization was Joel Brand, who devoted himself wholeheartedly to this operation and showed deep human attitude. His house became the center place for everything related to rescue, and he risked his family in doing so. But he and his wife Hansi did not hesitate. I remember one day they let into their home 15 members of the Zionist Jews from Poland who came through Slovakia. That is written by one Josef Kornianski, who wrote in his book, published in Israel in Hebrew.
And what is the name of the book?
On Pioneer's Mission. He's a Polish. He arrived from Poland and he arrived later in Israel before the Nazis entered Hungary. I mentioned earlier that the knitting factory, his business, was used also for rescue affairs, and here he mentions it. He says, for everything, and here we have his house became the central for everything related to, and his family. Okay, it's a little bit later, it didn't fit on the page. He mentions also the factory where the meetings were kept. And many other sources also mention the camp. Now, what was known about Yoel in 1943 in Jerusalem? In Jerusalem, there were complaints about the way how Kraus was running the Palestinian office in Budapest. And in Jerusalem, they suggested that Yoel will get equal rights in the distribution of certification, equal rights to Kraus, because Kraus behaves unfairly with the non-religious Zionist parties. Nothing came out of it, but they didn't choose Kastner. They didn't choose anything. They mentioned just Yoel, because he is helping a lot the refugees. That official Jewish agency document from 43. So they knew Yoel is a significant rescue activist in 33 in Jerusalem.
Did it materialize? Did they give certificates to your father?
They give nothing to my father.
The certificates, he wasn't...
No, he didn't get the permit. The Kraus kept everything to him and didn't allow anyone to intervene, and my father was not the one who will fight for it. So that's what was known in Jerusalem. What was known about Yoel in Istanbul in 43, sorry. The rescue action in Hungary were handled mostly by Yoel Brand, first place, Peretz Reves and others. Kastner is not mentioned at all. 1943. Kastner was invented later, and he's not in the list. The one who wrote it is Venya Pomeranz, who changed his name later, Professor Zeev Hadari. I met him once. He was amazed to see the ignorant, useless Yoel Brand's son serve as a scientific counselor in the Israeli embassy in Germany. Because they made from him such a non-human almost, and is zero in their effort to minimize his contribution to rescue. But in 43, he was the figure. Now, I have to explain how come that a few days later, Hannah Ben Nun said that he spent about 2 weeks in my room because she was young. So she were put in the children's room. He was a few years bigger, but she was still something like 15 or 16. So how come that the police came a few days after? Very simple. The housekeeper in Budapest had to report on every person staying in the house over the night. I'm not sure for 1 day, but for 2 days for sure. They were locking the gate at about 9 o'clock in the evening and opening only at 7, and you have to call them in order to open the gate to the house. That was the tradition, and they were supposed to report to the police. In order to convince him not to report on time, you have to be in very good relation with it and help him financially. The same with the local policemen, who easily notice anything unusual in a house. And my parents, they're in very good relation with their Hungarian neighbors, and no one ever betrayed them.
That's really quite remarkable.
For example, the knitting factory never mind. The knitting factory was given formally to the ownership of one of the employees. According to the documentation, her name was Kovashdine. Kovashdine means the wife of Kovashdi. That's the way names are written in Hungarian. You will see in documents my mother is called Blondne, the wife of Ban. So I think she was already a widow, but during all the war and all the anti-Jewish legislation, she never noticed anything unusual in the workshop, even though many people who knew not a word in Hungarian were going about, and she always looked at the other side and cared for the parents, so that's the way we could make our living. So that's just to show you that because the parents met and helped many refugees, they had a lot of stories, and therefore in 1941 they were already prepared that it's too dangerous to be deported. In 1939, I think, my father was drafted to the Hungarian army. Later on, the labor service was invented or established for the Jews, for non-reliable people, so he evaded it. He became ill of it, but he evaded the working battalions, and this saved him, because most of the people who were recruited to the working battalions never came back.
You have...
That's his military certificate, a copy of it. The original is in the Hungarian-speaking museum in Tzfat. So, my parents were always one step before the anti-Jewish legislation in Hungary. In Hungary came into force 3 Hungarian major anti-Jewish laws, not to speak about the 1920 law of numerous clauses that limited the number of Jewish students, but in 38, 39 and 40 or 41, 3 major Jews who limited the right of Jews to employ Christians, to own businesses, everything. My parents always were one step ahead, because they listened, they helped refugees, they heard the refugees, they believed the refugees, and behaved accordingly. So, 1943, after Springman managed to get contact to Jewish organization in the free world, mainly in Istanbul, but also later in Switzerland, money starts arriving from there. Now, based on a request from Istanbul to formalize the group that was assisting, the Zionist group that was assisting refugees, in order to have some formal representative entity that accept money, so they can send their money, they wanted some establishment to create. So Kastner, with his very sharp political senses, understood immediately that a good opportunity, and named, not invented the Rescue Committee of Budapest, but formally reported, I have established the rescue committee in Budapest, which started 2 years, 1.5 years before he joined the group. He was brought to the group only in 42, or middle 42, by Springman, who testified that they were looking for someone who can represent the group or the refugee interest to the Jewish community in Hungary, to get their financial support and political support. And therefore Kastner was brought by Springman to the group. Kastner invented nothing. Anyway, he reported, I have established the committee, and he named himself as CEO or something like that, even though historians admit that until later he reported about establishing the committee in, I think, January 43, until the second quarter of 43, he was the less active in the group. What made him more active? Once money started arriving, he took for his living, for the money that came to assist the refugees, for his living. The only committee member who lived from the money sent from abroad to assist the refugees. So that's the way he became more active. In early 44, Springman left the group. By the way, when the formal group was established, Kastner doesn't report Yoel as a member in his report about what he did in the Holocaust. He didn't mention Yoel as a member of the committee. He just said that Yoel took him on himself the Tiul operation, which is the rescue operation. So Yoel was the only one tasked with rescue. Only 2 persons had specific tasks in this committee. Springman, who was responsible for the communication with the free world and with finance, and Yoel, who was the main operator of the rescue. All others were doing politics. Anyway, the group came, money came, and Hansi was not member, by the way, of this committee, even though he worked with the committee and she has a lot of influence, but she was not official member.
But I think your mother was very instrumental in with documents, with forged documents.
Everywhere. We will come to it. So about helping refugees, I think we skipped this. The risk of assisting refugees in Hungary. According to one historian, the relatively more reliable, Asher Cohen, the only historian that I trust because he made interviews with the people who came from there, not asking Yad Vashem. So he says in his book, Hungary was a police station, all the time, before the Germans. And the chance of being caught was high. Why? Because the Hausmeister or the housekeeper in every house had to report and so on. The police response could be harsh. Imprisonment in a detention camp. For any help to refugees, entire families were sent to detention camps. Now, one reliable source that Bauer especially likes says as following: Yoel's help to refugees did not put him directly in mortal danger because he was Hungarian citizen. But I can show you my new birth certificate I got from Budapest with a apostille certified document that say his father was Romanian citizen. As I told you, he was not. He had no citizenship. But of course, he was not Hungarian citizen, so he was in mortal death. But for Bauer, any lie against Yoel is an evidence.
Your father never had Hungarian citizenship.
He had. From 1906, when he was born, till 95, when he left, 1910 or 11, when he left Hungary, and further on until 1920, when his birthplace became Romania. So he stayed with the old Hungarian passport, which probably was renewed in Germany, because he traveled to America in 1923, and in the Alice Island documentation, he appears as a Hungarian Jew living in Germany. So he probably, the Hungarian means he came with Hungarian passport, because he had later a false German passport. But it was not fully legal, because he was supposed to become Romanian, but he was not there. So he exists from 1920 or 21 on, when after the Trianon Treaty, which was an annex to the Versailles Treaties after World War I, he had practically no citizenship. And hence I was born without any citizenship. So we spoke about the relief organization. Okay, so it's not important. Just a few words about Kastner. As I told you, Kastner was brought to the committee in 1942. Now, according to Yad Vashem, without any proof whatsoever, Kastner started helping refugees in 1941. So the only source that can be guessed is Kastner's report, where he says that in December 1941, he managed to arrange a meeting of prominent Jews in Hungary, parliament member or ex-parliament member, and so on. And the report, according to Kastner, reported about what he says he knew at the time, that about 1 million Jews were already murdered. It's not far from the truth, by the way. And the Germans started with gas trucks. It also fits the fact that it was known at the time, and so on and so on. And he suggested to establish a permanent but not official Jewish institute or group or someone who will take political measures to prevent the destruction of the Hungarian Jewry. So as a mistake, Braham, the American, took this, and when he wrote about it, he speaks about refugees. But refugees in Kastner document are not mentioned. are Hungarian. At the time, there were probably very few hundred of refugees in Hungary at the time, but Jews were about 1 million. So if what Kastner wrote is right, he had the right idea. He was a clever politician. But because for the Israeli establishment, the 1 million Jews are not important, therefore they changed the fact and wrote as if he were caring for refugees, because the refugees were young Zionist pioneers, and they cared only for these. Now, if you read German, which is the original Kastner report, I can show it to you in German. If you read Hebrew, I can show it to you in Hebrew. I can't show it in English. I don't have the English translation of the report. Both the translation to Hebrew, the original German, speak about Hungarian Jewry. What he wanted is the same what he wanted with the Rescue and Relief Committee, a source to finance himself, because he had no income at the time. He had no income until the committee was established, and he made his living by as a professional Zionist. He was collecting money from rich people for Keren HaYesod. Now, to improve his image, Bauer says that Yoel was living this way. Not Kastner, who never had any job unless a political group cared for him. So that's Kastner. But we have to remember, he was a clever politician. This picture you two should take. This is the little Kish Majestic. That's the hotel where I spent the night when the Germans invaded Hungary.
Is it in Budapest?
It doesn't exist there, but it's in the Buddha, up in the hill. Because I had asthma as a child, I was brought there up in the hill for better air, and there the family, my mother used to bring me, and we were there the night the Germans invaded.
How old were you at this time?
3.5. Now, the one who wrote many mistakes about the family was also a clever guy. It's my father's cousin, André Bis, and he, as far as I know, wrote in the paper a small article saying that there are too many Jews in that place, in this little pension, Kish Majestics. So he immediately understood that it's dangerous to stay there, and since he was grown up not by his original real mother, but by his father's next wife, who was a German, or from German origin, Christian, I don't remember what. She was raised as a Christian. He had good non-Jewish papers, so he could relatively freely move. He came to the hotel, almost forced my mother to leave the place with us immediately. So he saved us. What he wrote later, never mind, he was very angry probably. But still, he took us from there. Next day, the Germans took the place, all the Jews were driven away, and that became the headquarters of Eichmann.
And you were there the night before?
Yeah, I was the night before.
And this became Eichmann's headquarters?
Yes. All the negotiations with Eichmann took place in this place.
Does it still exist today?
It doesn't exist. I was there.
I just want to show, here's a picture of your father with your brother and...
Yes, that's from the winter of 94, 40, 41, I believe, because I am only a few months old, so it must be something in the winter between 40 and 41.
And what happened to the Jews that were there that they were deported?
I assume so.
So he saved your life,
I say. My mother also, even whatever, appreciated him because, as she said, he cared for his real mother, who was a Jew. And he helped the rescue committee. Once my father left, he became a significant player in the rescue committee. So I bought this, that's the symbol for me, the Germans are here.
And do you have any memories, any recollections?
From this place?
Or any when the Germans came? Or?
I have, but not from this place. And I have things before the Germans came, I think. I have memories from the wartime, but not stay in this hotel. Maybe it was very common for me. Many times being there, so it's not something special. So I told you earlier about the meetings in Slovakia, and that's how the negotiation in Hungary started. And I told you about the deal of goods for trucks, or blood for trucks, or blood for commodities, different names. The original name, Blut for Ware, if you speak German. Do you speak German?
I understand from Yiddish.
Ah, okay. I understand Yiddish from German. So, with this detail, my father went abroad, no visa, we will continue later, but my father left, and Kastner was not involved in the meetings with Eichmann until my father left. And he never said that he is interested of being there. Later he complained I was banned from the meetings. That's not true. He didn't show any wish to attend. He was, at the time that Yoel made the meetings with Eichmann, he had these private meetings with Litzeni. Now, Yoel, after each meeting, gave a full report, detailed report, and we knew it is detailed because we have comparison, we have it from the German side also. So give a full report to his wife Hansi, to Kastner, to Otto Komoy, the main leaders of the committee there.
This is just a picture of Komoy.
This is Otto Komoy, yes. Somewhere here you have also a picture of Springman, and I think he deserves to have his picture also. If not, we will take the picture if you don't find from the Hebrew book. Anyway, Kastner at the time was discussing with Liceni, arranging his biggest mistake during the Holocaust, the permission to travel to Cluj. This is the biggest mistake he did. Of course, he made this mistake without consulting Hansi. And whenever he did something without consulting Hansi, he made a mistake. And this was a crucial mistake. He went with the permission of the Nazis to Cluj, officially to meet with Liceni, but at the time he went to visit the leadership of the Cluj ghetto, which has already existed as a ghetto. And probably at this time he told the facts about the coming deportation and about the rescue option with the what is called later the Kastner train, or the train of the privilege, which is in reality was the demonstration of goodwill promised to Yoel in order to convince the West and the Joint and the Jewish authorities that the Germans are really willing to make a fair deal. So they
I'm just going to show, this is
Springman, yes. It is important to mention it because he was a very important figure. Without him there would have been no committee, no Kastner train, no Strasshof group, and probably the Budapest Jewry would not
and in this picture we have
survive.
Is the group also with Kastner in that group?
Yes, Kastner and Hansi and Komoy.
So Kastner goes to Cluj and he meets with the
leadership, his friends in Cluj.
And they were already in the ghetto.
They were already in the ghetto and probably told them about the chance of some people that will not be deported. That's the group. And these people never warned the rest of the public. Kastner didn't warn them and the leadership didn't warn them. What Kastner did there, we don't know. Maybe he warned the leadership, don't know. Maybe he said the leadership, be careful if too many people evade, and instead of this and this number which was in the beginning will be less of you will go to the freedom. Maybe, I don't know. But this made him very good target for his enemies, let's say. So only when it became clear that the Germans intend to send some Jew to the free world, Kastner said, oh, okay, so why should Bis Bondi, Gross Bondi, join Yoel to aboard? Maybe I go, it will be better. But the Germans selected their envoy, not the Jews. And then he tried to replace Yoel either with him or one of his friends in Cluj, his father-in-law or other of the friends, but it was not accepted. So he was very, very upset that Yoel was going, and in his report he blamed the failure of the mission on Yoel because he was not educated. So, and that probably why promoting Kastner is so important to the Israeli establishment because he protects them from their failure that they thwarted Yoel's mission. As we will see, first act we saw that they invited him without a visa. When this was not enough, they took further steps to thwart his mission. And they probably were terrified from the thought that this will be ever revealed. Therefore, they were so afraid from the option that Yoel will testify in the Kastner trial.
Wow. And I think also, Daniel, sending your father is because you had his two sons.
We will come to the two sons.
Yeah.
So he was not sent, and here I'm coming, I think, to what you are asking. To the last meeting of my father with Eichmann. Eichmann summoned my mother also to attend the meeting. He told her that she and the children had to remain in Budapest, meaning you are hostages, and report me daily any news that came from Yoel. So that's the way how I become a hostage. Now, the fact that I wasn't a hostage is also mentioned in Eichmann's interview to the Nazi journalist Sassen, which he gave when he was still free. And he says there that he admits there that he took the Brandt family as hostages, but he never take any action against them. You see me here. So it's also true, but it's only a half true, because the Yoel family members who were on the train in the castle were never released.
They stayed in Bergen-Belsen?
Till the end of the war, not till December, till the end of the war. They were liberated in May by the Russians. So it was half true. He didn't make any effort to find me or to find Hansi. Later on he mixes between Hansi, Yoel's wife, and Kastner's wife, but he admits he took us as hostages. So I become a hostage. Yoel went to Istanbul, no visa, and what is Hansi doing after Yoel went to Istanbul in Budapest? First of all, she had to report Eichmann daily or almost daily, and in a very early stage, within 2 days or so, 3 days, she decides to bring Kastner with her to the discussions with Eichmann. Bis, who took me out of the hotel and wrote an ugly book about the parents, wrote that Hansi delayed the meeting between Kastner and Eichmann for many weeks, and that caused a lot of casualties. Nonsense. I believe it's a mistake, not deliberate. Anyway, Hansi almost immediately brought Kastner to the meeting, and the first task they had to explain why Yoel is not coming back. It was spoken about 2 weeks or so, time elapsed, and nothing came. And the Germans were asking more than that. about a month after Yoel left, the British published the mission in the paper. And in Berlin they saw, oh, Jews were sent to abroad, what's that? And the German ambassador, it was not ambassador, it was the power, the one who...
A consul?
No, he was by far more than... No, he was probably... Hungary was occupied. So he was the highest figure in Germany, even though he didn't took the title. He left the title to Horthy. But he was the representative of Germany in Budapest. So he wrote to Berlin, yes, it was sent and to buy specific needed stuff for the SS and so on. And he adds, my advisor in the consulate, or it's not consulate, the embassy, told me that his impression that the discussions of yours are going well and the publication is just to mislead the Russians. So they still believe that, partially, that something will came out of it. We will see later it also, but they still believed it in August, that something may come from the deal. Anyway, Hansi knew what to do, and why to bring another person with her. The Nazis told her to, first of all, for a Nazi officer to discuss business, let's say, with a woman is humiliation, because Nazis did not recognize women as equivalent to men. According to Nazi philosophy, if you can call it philosophy, woman's place was in home, raising children, making children, cooking, washing, caring for the children and for the husband. They are not supposed to be involved in real world issues. Therefore, for example, American women worked during the war because they needed work power. British women worked in wartime, both in England and in America. A woman served in the army, not in Germany. So, I don't know how some Hansi knew it or felt it and knew she has to bring some. In addition, she knew what responsibility is involved. And he felt that she has to bring something, and she selected Kastner. And she selected Kastner for few reasons. First of all, he spoke German. Basic requirement. He was smart. He was a trained politician. He has a title, doctor, very important for the Nazis. Additional advantage, able to divert from the truth when needed. It was extremely important. People ask why not Komoy Komoy was not able to deviate from the truth. Kastner was, and it was extremely important. First problem to explain why Yoel is not coming back. And second problem, that the Hungarians were extremely interested in Yoel mission. Why? They suspected that the Germans are going to make a deal with their Jews, what they regarded their property, And they believe any deal that can be made, any profit that can be made from Jews belong to us. 2 weeks or so earlier, they made such a deal when they took over the Manfred Weiss industrial complex to the ownership of the SS and released 50 Jews from Hungary for this. They sent them with German plane to Portugal. And this terrified the Hungarians. So they wanted to know what the Germans are doing for. And they were very bothered with it. They were aware that Yoel disappeared. So a few days after Yoel left, a group of illegal stayers in Hungary, refugees, I don't know who they were exactly, were caught by the Hungarian police with false documents. Under pressure, somehow they knew who supplied the forms for the documents, and they give up the name and the address of the printing house. He was caught by the Germans, heavily tortured. Hansi says that he hardly could recognize him. And he said, yes, Hansi ordered the documents, so it was a good case to arrest more or less all the available members of the rescue committee, including Kastner, including others. They let them stay in jail 5 days to soften them, to make it easier later for the interrogation. And on the 5th or the 6th day, they took only Hansi to interrogation by the head of the Hungarian Gestapo. I have his name, I don't remember it now, but I can find it. Anyway, not a nice person. They tortured Hansi. She admitted everything regarding the false document. She took on herself all the responsibility about Yoel's mission. She said she knew nothing. Toward the evening, the Germans heard that Hansi and the committee were arrested. And now they were terrified, because they were afraid that they will reveal the details of the deal to the Hungarians. So they insisted on releasing the member, not releasing, but transferring them to the German authorities. The Hungarians were not so happy to do it, so the German I forget the name of the formal title of him. The German head of the German delegation in Budapest had to call the Prime Minister and tell him, you are releasing them. So they were released, and when the SS took them over, and when they heard that Hansi kept silent in her interrogation, according to Biss, they said he took as if Eichmann and Klages said. Klages was the security officer of the SS. They said that since then they respected Hansi and said that she has a courage of an Aryan, and he says that they begin to respect her. The declaration of Eichmann and Klages about Mrs. Bann's courage which they compared with that of an Aryan, were slightly amusing. They regarded Mrs. Brand with a certain amount of respect from then on. They did paid her, no doubt, the highest compliment these men could make to a woman. But I doubt if the writer who was in close contact with Klages had it from Eichmann. Maybe Klages told that was also Eichmann's impression, but he didn't hear it directly because he had no contact. He had only to Klages. Hansi, in her testimony in the Eichmann trial, says, once Eichmann told me that he didn't take steps against me, that I stayed alive, it was because I kept the state secret. That's why I won my life. That's citation from the Hansi testimony in the Eichmann trial. So what were the rescue committee in Budapest doing? They managed to arrange the Straßhof transport. What is the Straßhof transport? The Straßhof transport is a transport of about 15,000 Jews to Austria, to a place called Straßhof instead of Auschwitz. The people were sent in order to work them because in Vienna they needed manpower for work. But what's unique about this transport, that there was an order that the non-suitable for work, which were about 70% of the transport, should be kept alive. Never happened in Auschwitz. Those who were not fit to jest, to the chimney.
He's a close friend of mine, Aaron Shiver, and he was one of the children that survived.
There is a Air Force pilot among these. There is a Nobel Prize winner among these children. I am in contact with a medical professor who was among these children. So it was these people, many of them died because of bombing of both sides in Austria, disease and anything, but they were not murdered deliberately. And many of them survived. The Kastner train, as I told you, was a train of about 1,700 people that was supposed to be a demonstration of goodwill by the Germans to promote Joel's mission.
Can I just ask, then the Straßhof transport, was your mother involved?
My mother was involved in all the discussions with Eichmann until Becher became the major figure with whom Kastner started his talks. As long as it was Eichmann, Hansi was in. Once Kastner had Becher, who understood at the time that Germany is losing the war, and he was working for his alibi for after the war, so he took Kastner and kept him in, how do you say, Zimmergeffen, in wrapped with
safely, in a safe...
Yes. Then Hansi became less important in the discussions, but as long as it was with Eichmann, she was in everything. And she was also involved in this transport, mainly in the effort to make sure the children stay alive. She also, in her testimony, speak about her discussion with Eichmann, and when she insisted on the children and asked that at least the children should be left and she will take care for them, and Eichmann refused. He told her, you probably don't have children. And then he was very angry and said, if you behave like this, don't come to see me again. That's also from Hansi's testimony. It's available on the internet for everybody. So these two projects were fairly successful. I'm not going further to details because it doesn't mean how they managed, what they managed, but it worked. At least
you had family that were on the Kastner train.
On the train were two of Yoel's sisters, at the beginning 3, with their families for those who had family, only one had, and the one who had family had also, the sisters were much older than Yoel, and he was the youngest in the family. One of the sisters was my mother's age, so they had already grandchildren, and one of the grandchildren was in very bad medical condition, so he has to be brought to medical treatment, and therefore, even though Eichmann sent a special envoy to make sure that the Brandt family remains, when the first group of the transport moved to Switzerland in August, one group of the Brandt family, one of his sisters, were released to Switzerland because the grandchild was in critical condition. He was partly saved in Switzerland because he remained handicapped for the rest of his life and died fairly early. Anyway, the rest of the family has been never released until the Russians come. So that's the story, and I think we shouldn't waste too much time on it.
But I just said to, for our listeners...
She was involved in everything which was done directly with Eichmann. Later on, the dealing of Kastner was mainly with Becher.
But with that train from Cluj, that was the hometown of Kastner. He was
no, but that was 300 or something, 377 people from Cluj.
And they were on the train.
In total, 1,700. Now, once again, to be fair with Kastner, the original request from the Germans was to release 600 people. This go to 700, this go to 1,000, and this go to 1,700, and that can be Kastner's achievement. So he made the group bigger, but added also some of his stuff. Okay, but still saved more people.
The difficulty is that who do you choose to go on the train?
Oh, the rabbi from Satmar was on the train. Many chalutzim who had no money were on the train. Some active Zionists were on the train. It was like Noah's Ark.
It was a mixture.
It was a mixture. Unlike the groups that was arranged by the Sternbuch brothers in Switzerland, the rabbis' transport, if you know about it, about 1,000 rabbis from Czechoslovakia, from the sample camp. I will recall the name, only rabbis. So it's different.
It's different, yeah. And was your mother a bit involved in the Kastner train as well?
Yes, of course.
So she was involved in saving Jews who went onto their train.
She also asked Eichmann to put me on the train.
And he refused. And your
he
brother?
refused.
She wanted to put you and your brother on.
Yes, and Eichmann refused. And then he said, okay, so it means probably it's serious. These people really may be brought to
Safety.
So it is also in her testimony that she asked Eichmann to let me go on the train or let the children go, and he refused, and so on. So these were the major things with Eichmann. But she did a lot of other things during the German occupation. She was a very important member of the group or the organization created by Otto Komoy, the Department A of the International Red Cross in Hungary, tasked with immigration of children. Officially, some countries accepted to allow each a few hundred Jewish children, and therefore the International Red Cross had the authority to deal with them, because at this moment they become foreigners. And the Red Cross, in his task, it is accepted that for foreign citizens they are authorized to care, not for local citizens. So the children become foreigners, and that's the way the so-called Jewish underground built their children's home in Budapest and fed them and so on. And Hansi was the head of the supply committee of the Department A or Ostei A in the Red Cross. And she was in charge of caring for all the supplies and food and everything for the children houses in Hungary. And this way they managed to save many hundreds of children and adults as well, because they got the protection of the Red Cross. Not all of them were saved, not always the Hungarians respected but more than that, she was also involved on behalf of the Red Cross in caring for supply to the ghetto. She was part of the supply committee for the ghetto. So she was involved in everything. More than that, in January 45, she get this document. It is written not in German anymore, it's written Hungarian and Russian. She went to the Russian authorities during the battle over Budapest and got this permission, officially allow her to purchase transport food for the population of Budapest. You have to remember, Budapest was starving at the time, because Budapest was in siege for many weeks, and there was nothing to eat. So this document she told after the Russians occupied Pest and before they occupied Buda. It's January, during the war.
Yes, you have it in your book.
Yes, because it's important, so I put it, but there you have the original colors also. And if you see the name written here, the name written here is Blond Yenu Ne. Ne Ishto, his wife. Yeno is the Hungarian first name of my father.
Did your mother, was she ever in touch with Wallenberg or with Karl Lutz?
Always.
Karl Lutz?
Karl Lutz, not directly. She was aware to his... and she never been in the glass house. She was doing the glass house was very political issue, and I don't want to go into it. Not Kastner, Krauss' behavior. There is a book about him, how great he did, and so on. And there is one line I found, which is, for me, says everything. That he blames Kastner, the nice book about Kastner, that Krauss blamed Kastner that he prevented his effort to replace the representative of the International Red Cross in Budapest. The International Red Cross representative in Budapest got the title of writers of among the nations because he saved Jews. He created he gave the cover for the children's house and so on and so on. But he didn't do it with Krauss, and that for Krauss tried to torpedo it. That our nice...
And
but for him, for Krauss, there is a huge monument in a kibbutz because it was a religious. So the religious party made for him a big monument, as his was the big rescuer. So once I asked them, are you willing to mention that in addition to Krauss, some other people also worked on helping Jews? No, we don't have place for this. Not to mention, just to say that were also other. No way. Only the religious Krauss.
It's a pity.
All the documentation about the Holocaust in Israel is pure politic. Truth is not relevant. So that's what my mother is doing till the Russian occupation. All over the war. And I, at this time, hiding in a Hungarian family, as if I were their son.
Were you together with your brother?
Yes, we were two. And I still remember the Christmas tree there. And it was a huge tree, my height.
Do you remember the name of the family?
Yes, partially. I know the woman, I have the name. I know the man. I know family name, but they were not married. The family name was Biro. I have to look at the names that are mentioned in my book because it's important. So the names are mentioned. I can fairly easily find it. I don't recall the names now, but I mentioned the name of the woman who was in charge of the knitting factory, because these people
very important
deserve
the recognition. Sure. And why could you not stay with your mother? How come you had to go?
She was always with refugees, with politics, she was busy caring for children, and for our safety, she said better to be away.
Did she come and visit you?
From time to time, and the residents of the house realized that we are not the real children of the family with whom we stayed, and no one mentioned it to the authorities. So you see that not all the Hungarians were so bad as we tend to describe them, and not all the Jews are so nice as we would like to believe.
This is a wonderful picture of your mother with your brother and you in 45.
Yes, and that's already in Israel. I have also a picture with my brother just after the war.
This is later when you were reunited with your father. So during this time, your father he first went to Egypt, and then
he first went to Istanbul, Turkey. From there to Syria. From Syria he was brought by the British to Egypt, and later on he was released and brought to Jerusalem. And that was somewhere September. He came in May and he was released in about September, October. Now, let's go to Yoel's mission. What happened to Yoel?
1 minute.
I stayed during the German occupation, at least most of it, with a Hungarian couple. Later, my mother discovered that they were not married. She thought they were married, but it doesn't matter. They cared for me. The woman's name was Vilma. The man was Gabor. And the family of one of them was Biro. So that's the family where I stayed. I know the address. I have a photo of the house. During the war, a mortar shell entered the house, and this is, if you are speaking about stories, the people in the house were afraid from Russian bombardment, and of course from air attacks and so on, but on the ground from Russian guns. So the safest place in the shelter was in the corner which is toward the inner part of the city, because the Hungarians will not shoot on their citizens, and not to the other side. So this Gabor built a bed for him, for his partner, and for us to sleep in the safest corner of the basement. It was not fully underground. It was up to a certain height. I have a picture of it, and there was a little window just above the ground. Once the bed was ready, people in the building started to complain. Why should two foreign children get the safest place? So my mother happened to be there. She said, move away. Don't argue, just move away. So we moved away. On the same night, a short mortar shell entered through the window, landed on the bed. 16 people died around them. I don't remember the explosion. I just remember the coffins or stretchers with the...
So you could have been there.
I could be there.
You and your brother?
Yeah, there were horrible bombardment of Budapest, 1,000 American planes on the 2nd of July 44. A horrible bombardment. Gaza never got something like that. 1,000 planes, B-17, each with several tons of bombs. Budapest was totally destroyed.
And what was this, in 44?
44. If we have time, we will reach this.
And how long did you stay with this family?
I don't know whether we got there immediately after 19th March or a little bit later, but we were there almost until the liberation of Pest. Why almost? Because I remember, and it's documented by my mother, that one night after, according to my mother, the house went from hand to hand between the German and the Russian several times, we decided to leave the place, and I remember climbing a huge railway, elevated railway, where I had to climb it. I have in the project around, it's just near the house. It's very rare to see an elevated railway. Normally they are in street level. So I had to climb it, and I was then about 4 years old. It was very difficult. I remember that there was a wire along the railway, and I was warned not to dare to touch it because it electrified and so on. Now I know that it's for moving the rail. Maybe it was electrified, I don't know. And they were killed people on the rail because it was elevated, so it was good target, so we went there through the night and so on. So I enjoyed the day.
And did you have enough food when you were staying there?
My mother was in charge of supplying the whole food for everybody in Budapest. I am sure she cared for us, not exaggerated, but the minimum we had. I still remember that I was with a great desire to more and higher quality food when I met my father in early 46. So the shortage in Budapest, I don't remember the shortage, but I remember everything I had to eat when I left Hungary. Because in Slovakia there was food, in Hungary was a big shortage. And during the siege there was really hunger, people starved. In Slovakia, everything was available.
Can I ask, did you ever find out why they decided to take you and your brother?
Please?
How come they decided to have you and your brother in their home? Because it was...
First of all, they knew the family. I believe that my parents arranged for them the flat. It was a new building built by a relative of us, and properly my parents arranged for them this flat because it was new, and she worked, the woman worked for the family for many years, and we knew her and was in good relationship, that was smooth, and of course they were paid. And my mother sent them every few months money or packages or presents, even though she was very short with money because the government took care that the family will not have any extra money to be able to publish a piece of paper about Yoel's mission. And therefore Yoel was unemployed from the moment he arrived here, and Hansi could find a job only in the social work department in the municipality of Tel Aviv, which is, as you know, very poorly paid. So, but let's go to the story. Yoel arrives in Istanbul, first attempt to thwart his mission, denying visa. The second is more interesting, was reporting to the Americans that Yoel is not reliable. And this was done by a sophisticated method. There was a representative of the joint in Istanbul named Ruben Reznik. He was new there and he was not familiar with all what happened during the year, so he knew nothing about Yoel. When Yoel arrived in Istanbul, he was asked by the American ambassador Steinhardt in Ankara to make a report about Yoel's mission. So he wrote a report and he said that I have several interviews with Yoel, not even one. How do we know it? Because no one reported about such an interview, and because we know that Yoel was sent to the joint. If he knew he had a representative of the joint available there, all his mission would have a different shape. But he had no interview with this representative. Probably what he calls interview, he was attending meetings of the whole group of the Jewish delegations there with Yoel, probably ask one or more, without Yoel's knowing that he is representing the joint. Anyway, he said interviews. No such interview ever happened. No one reported it. I know it's documented that he was in connection with the Sochnut or the Israeli delegations there. Yoel was looking for the joint and he said it directly to Sharet when they met later in Syria, that he was sent to the joint. As he met a represented the joint in Istanbul, he wouldn't go to Syria. So that's the proof that he was unaware that there was a joint representative. And he says that he has consulted people who knew Yoel in Istanbul and in Budapest. Just a moment. How could you consult people in Budapest? The only way by telephone. But there are very few people who had telephones Jews who had telephones in Budapest. Who had telephone in Budapest at that time? Kraus had telephone.
Kastner maybe?
Kraus had telephone. And based on his impression from the interviews and from what he heard from those who knew her, he thought it is not as reliable and as honest as others tend to believe. So that second attempt to thwart Yoel's mission. Later on, the Americans are not very satisfied with this report, so they sent a special envoy from United States to learn about Yoel's mission. When he arrives, Yoel already arrested in Cairo. He insists on seeing Yoel. The British refuse, so he sees the British local minister, Lord Moyne, in Cairo, shows him a letter saying that the president is interested in the Yoel's mission. So he got the permission to interview Yoel, and then he wrote that he see no sight of evidence to the negative impression of Reznik. So that was the second attempt to describe it as not reliable.
But can I ask, why would the Joint do that? Why would Resnick do it?
I don't know. I can guess, but I am not going to guess here. They made, it seems as if they made deliberately anything to thwart his mission. The reason, maybe I can suggest you a book that maybe you will agree with it, and we can speak about it later, not for recording now. So that was, Resnick report was the second. They tried to convince the Americans not to be involved, not to have the Jews. By the way, the Zionist leadership in the United States also worked against the establishment of the War Refugee Board, who sent, for example, Wallenberg to Hungary. We spoke about Resnick report. Then the American second envoy, Hirschman, who interviewed Yoel and said he saw no sight of what...
He interviewed him in Cairo.
He met him in Cairo. Later on he met him once again, but regardless of this meeting, he said, and he write it in October, while in Istanbul, in the last month, it means September, there had been several unconfirmed rumors that Brandt had confessed to being double agent. Who distributed these rumors? So he went to the British. So this was categorically denied by the British intelligence officer Colonel Gibson, and the release of Brandt by the British demonstrated that he was no longer a suspect. That's what Gibson said to Hirschman. Who distributed that? Your guess is as good as my guess. That's the third attempt, but there is a fourth attempt. That was not enough. On the 6th of June, Resnick's report and other information reaches the War Refugee Board in America, and on 6th of June, do you know what happened on the 6th of June 44? D-Day. The 6th of June...
it was D-Day, that's right.
The most important issue on the desk of Morgenthau, the minister responsible for the War Refugee Board, the main discussion is about Yoel's mission. 2 days after that, they informed the president on the 8th of June. On the 7th of June, Statinius from the State Department informs Goldman, one of the leaders of the American Zionists,
Nachum Goldman.
Yes, Nachum, to inform him about Yoel's mission. And here I have two references to say. Goldman definitely did need to give the advice that he did, advice that he must have known would doom the prospect of accepting the offer. He told Statinius the US had to tell the Soviet Union. She said he must have known it would doom the attempt to save Jews. That's what American historian, what Bauer says. Nachum Goldman, a European Jew, intelligent, not from the East. No, we are Europeans, we are better than the others. This is smells like anti-Semitism for me, racism. A European Jews, not a Jew, immediately understands Chertok's policy of negotiating for the sake of negotiating. And upon hearing the proposal from the new Under-Secretary of State, Edward Satinius, Jr., on June 7th already, advised him along these lines. Tell the Russians, doom the... By the way, Sharet didn't made up his mind regarding the mission, so he could understand Sharet policy because there was still no Sharet's policy. So that's how Bauer, and this is a brutal attempt to prevent any further discussions, because they started with trucks, but you can modify it. And evidence. In August, that discussion in Switzerland with Seilmeyer, and then Becher reports to Himmler. It will be impossible to get trucks, but we may get some other less not so visible stuff like trucks. So the Germans could have been accepting less, but he wanted to doom the whole thing. So 4 attempts. First, preventing visa. Second, sending negative report to the American authorities. Third, distributing the rumor about double agent. And fourth, the advice to the State Department. All this had to be covered from public eye. And therefore, once they understood what they have done, they are doing everything in their power. All the governments of Israel, from then to today, to eliminate this from history. And therefore they time to bury Yoel, make him thief, liar, drunk, everything. By the way, Bauer described Yoel as drunk. Let's see what Sharet wrote about Yoel once he met him. He gave once a detailed report about what Yoel said, and it's very important. And he also says,
where did Sharet meet with Yoel? Was it in Syria?
He met Yoel in Syria. Here is what Sharet wrote in a telegram after meeting Yoel. Interviewed him Sunday, means June 11, 44, not 45. 6 hours. Found him 100% reliable.
This is Moshe Sharet.
Moshe Sharet. Was deeply impressed by his purity, character, spirit, self-sacrifice, factual exactness, soberness. You may know what soberness means in English.
That he was not drunk ever. That he was sober.
He is in huge tension, unbelievable tension, and still he is not drinking. He is not drunk. But for Bauer, and all the Israeli historians, Yoel is drunk, of
They put
course.
that he died of cirrhosis.
That he,
When they said the cause how he died, when he had the heart attack, they added cirrhosis.
that's the kidney disease.
No, cirrhosis is the liver.
He has no liver problem.
But they wrote it.
Yes, but this is a lie. He suffered from diabetes,
But not cirrhosis.
he
liver.
suffered from angina pectoris, and the diabetes was caused, that's the way he evaded the Hungarian work battalion.
So can I ask you, Danny, Moshe Sharett became the Prime Minister. When he was the Prime Minister, couldn't he have rehabilitated?
Rehabilitated, he was terrified that this will be revealed what happened. And therefore, he did everything in his power to prevent Yoel from testifying. And the state of Israel
But he
did
admitted.
want
But Sharett had met Yoel and he wrote a very positive report.
at the time. But later on, when Yoel realized that his mission was, Yoel became angry and blamed the Sochnut for handling the case not as they should do. There's no acceptable reason why they invited him to Istanbul without a visa.
Yeah.
That's a crime. Crime that caused thousands of Jewish lives, if not tens or hundreds of thousands. This is a crime. The way it was handled is a crime, or a unbelievable stupidness. Since then, all the history is a cover-up for this failure. Now,
And this Moshe Sharett report,
I have it.
Where can one find it?
I have it. Everything I have.
Where was it published? Was it?
It was not published, but I have it in the documentation of different. I have the original telegram. Everything I collected, I have it. I have Resnick report, I have Hirschman's report, I have Sharett reports, both the report about the discussion and also this.
And after he did this report, did it have any effect? After Sharett wrote this report?
No, the British almost immediately worked on blocking any effort to save Jews. They opposed any effort to save Jews.
I think one of the reasons they were scared that they would come to Palestine.
Exactly. The Russians also opposed. The Americans did their best. But let's go another. After that, that's yours. After all these events, what happened with your report? So, as I told you, on the 6th of June, it was on the table of the minister in charge of rescue affairs. On the 8th of June, it was on the table of the president. Later on, in mid-June, they get a telegram from Switzerland, from Harriman, the ambassador there, with the representative of the War Refugee Board there, with a detailed document that proves every detail Yoel said. For example, the figure 12,000 people a day will be transported to Auschwitz is only from Yoel's report. No other source. And here it repeats this figure. Eichmann says that he will concentrate Eichmann told Yoel that he will concentrate 310,000 Jews. The report says that about 320,000 has been already transported. So everything matches what Yoel's report says, and is recommended to bombed the railroads to Auschwitz and other places, and to pressure the Pope to put pressure on Horthy, the Hungarian, to stop the deportation of Jews from Hungary. Now here, people invented the Auschwitz report. The Auschwitz report, according to Israeli reports, claims that the report was prepared in order to warn Hungary, Jewry, from what is waiting from them. The fact is that Hungary is not mentioned in the report. And those who fled Auschwitz, Verba and Wetzlar knew nothing about Hungary and mentioned nothing. The connection is made by mistake, because Weissmandel wrote in end of May or early June to Freudiger in Budapest that sent him the report and said, now it's your turn. So you don't have to read Auschwitz report. In Budapest, people know that 6 million Jews has been already murdered, because that's what US says to Sharet. It means that was known in Budapest. And when Weissman, now it's your turn, it's not because the report, it's because the Germans invaded Hungary. So the Auschwitz report has no effect. Further, on the 28th of June, the Americans warned Hungary, if you continue with the deportation, you will pay for it. The Hungarians continue with the deportation. The Pope warns Horthy. The King of Sweden talked to Horthy, but it does stop the deportation. Then the Americans make the heaviest bombardment of Budapest on the 2nd of July. With about 1,000 aircrafts. That convinced Horthy to stop the deportation, and that's the way for at least part of Budapest population to survive. In Israel, they try to connect it to the Auschwitz protocol, which has hardly any effect in Washington. Yoel's report is mentioned many, many times. So that's how everything in the history of the Jewish activities in the Holocaust is modified. Now, if we leave for a moment my family's history, just as an example, for years everybody here knew that the uprising in Warsaw was made by Anilevich. And those who were interested knew already in the 60s and 70s that the main uprising was not Anilevich and not the socialists, but the revisionists. It became known only when a strong politician...
It was Moshe Ahrens. Moshe Ahrens, Flags over Warsaw.
I have it in a book. He published it, I think, in 2001.
Actually, he spoke at the Great Synagogue about...
He spoke about flags above the...
Flags over Warsaw.
Over the ghetto.
Over the ghetto. I was there at the evening when he spoke.
Now, I have all this written in a book that was published in 1977 and written in the 60s. So it was all known, but the government covered it. Now, who is the big hero, Anilevich? We had kibbutz of him and so on. He died in a bunker, hiding with 50 armed fighters. This is the big fighter, this is the glory, hiding, not daring to go out and fight when you are armed. 50 people. So all the history is pure politic. The Jewish history is pure politic in Israel. And unless you make a serious research, you will be fooled by an ocean of false publications sponsored by Yad Vashem and other authorities.
Sure, Danny, I just have to ask you because it's amazing. You mentioned that your mother was she testified in the Achman trial.
Yes. My father also
And your father?
testified. And just the judges were probably prepared to be anti-Yoel, and they always try to confuse him and to cause him to believe that he is lying and so on. Very no witness was treated this way.
Only your parents?
My father.
Your father? Did your father and your mother, did they speak to you when they saw Ahmed at the trial? Was it difficult for them to go to the trial or to be at the trial and to give witness?
First of all, the first question is, why were they not, especially Hansi, brought to identify him? Because she was the last people
to actually know him,
to see him. Kastner was not alive. Yoel left earlier. She was the only one who saw it during the war in Budapest. She was not called to identify him. More than that, as in the Kastner trial, they were not interested to invite Yoel to testify. They tried to avoid the testimony of Hansi and Yoel. And in the Eichmann trial as well. But it was so obvious that it is so important, so they couldn't do it. And after long hesitate, toward the end only, they were invited to testify.
Were your parents in the Kastner trial?
Yes, both of them.
They testified in the Kastner trial?
That's the time that the story of my father's mission was become known to the public. And that what was so frightening to the government, and that what the book here I told you says that Sharet was terrified from the thought that Yoel will testify, not because he suspected that Yoel will lie, because he suspected that Yoel will say the truth and reveal how his mission was thwarted. That was terrified Sharet.
And can I ask, because it's a very controversial, with Chana Shenesh, did your mother have any contact when she came to Budapest? Or?
That's a shameful story.
It's a terrible story.
It's a shameful story from the part of Mrs. Shenesh. Why should Hansi go to the jail and bring a package to a British Meragel?
Like a spy?
A British spy. Why shouldn't the mother bring the package? Hansi told them, I can help you get stuff, but you should bring it. Why Hansi? Because she tried to involve as many people as possible. Hopefully this will help. Why should Hansi be involved in bringing packages to a British spy? Give me any answer you wish. That's crazy. When she went to Kraus, Kastner was expert in releasing people from custody, claiming that they are on the list to go to Palestine. He has their contacts, he was fairly good in this. And therefore, really at the beginning, she turned to Krauss. And he gave the name of the assistant of Krauss, who was in charge of the glass house. And he asked the mother for money in order to help her daughter. By mistake, she mixed the names Kastner and Krauss and blamed Krauss for this. But the address she gave and the men he met there were Krauss' address and Krauss and HaShomer HaTzair stuff. And he got a Jewish rescuer.
Oy, 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 it's so sad. Did your parents ever speak to you about when they saw Ahmed? How was their feelings when they saw him?
I was then in a officer's course in the army, and I was not really present at home, and I was not able to follow the trial. So I knew very little about the reaction. From time to time when I went home, once he was caught, they were waiting for invitation to testify in the pre-hearing of and no one called them.
And how was their reaction when they actually saw Ahmed?
I don't know. What I know is that after the Kastner trial, my father wrote his book. After the Eichmann trial, he was hospitalized. And after he testified in two of Eichmann's assistants in Budapest, Hansi and Krumai, one of them, Kastner gave a affidavit in favor of him. After this trial, where I intended and I saw at least part of this trial, my father got a heart attack, and that was his end.
And he passed away, yeah?
He passed away. I went with my parents to Germany in '64. I attended some hearings of the trial. I heard my father's testimony there. I saw the negative response of the judge against my father, while the suspects were Mr. and so after that he got a heart attack, and I heard it when I left and arrived home.
And I just had to ask you, Yoel, this has been unbelievable, but when you came to Israel and you saw your father, I think it was still...
When I came to Israel and saw my father.
When were you reunited with your father?
In the beginning of '46 in Slovakia.
So it was in Slovakia?
I was smuggled from Hungary to Slovakia. And there, do you remember Colonel Gibson, who told Hirschman that the release of Yoel is the evidence, he is not suspected? He was the British consul in Prague in '46. And when I was smuggled out of Budapest, and I have a picture of the person who took me out of Budapest.
You together with your brother?
He bought a with my mother. My father bought a declaration to a lawyer, and there's a lawyer and those who officially certified document.
Commission of Oaths?
He had a certified document from a lawyer that these are his children to the British consul in Prague. And the British consul in Prague felt very bad about the British behavior in Yoel's affair, and as a favor of Yoel, he wrote my brother and me into Yoel past papers as if we left the country with him. So we arrived in Palestine in 46 as returning people.
And do you remember being smuggled out of Budapest?
Yes.
Were you together with your mother when you were smuggled?
No. My mother left Budapest earlier. She was accepted to a course in Switzerland of treating handicapped people. And since Hungary was full with handicapped after the war, and she was an employee of the International Red Cross, she went on behalf of the International, with recommendation of the International Red Cross, to Switzerland to learn how to care for handicapped people. And that's what she did later for the municipality of Tel Aviv. He worked with handicapped. He worked with orphans.
And where did you stay when she went?
When she went, I stayed maybe with aunt, maybe with friends of the family. I was a ping pong.
But was it going to be for a long time, or did you know how long this would be?
It was probably not more than weeks, because they have to arrange that my father will arrive, and earlier my mother will leave, so we can be smuggled out, and all the families out.
So it was not communist?
It was. Prague was not as communist as Hungary yet. Prague became the Iron Curtain fall on Prague later.
And how was the reaction when you saw your father? You hadn't seen him for a few years.
2 years.
2 years. How was the interaction when you saw your father?
I know that he ordered a nice meal for us, and I still remember the meal.
And did you cry when you saw him? Was it very emotional?
I don't know. I know that I admired the schnitzel. It means that food was missing.
It was missing, yeah.
So that's what shows me for sure that we were in shortage of real food. And later on, I was hardly expected to the Israeli army. Underweight, extreme underweight.
And to be together reunited as a family?
It was only on 47. When my mother arrived in Israel, she had to wait until 47, only then she got a certificate to go to Israel.
Because there was the white paper,
yes.
The British wouldn't allow.
So that's the story.
So I have to ask you, this has been, there are no words, there really are no words, because what you have told us it's the truth that has been hidden. It really has been hidden.
Yes, it deliberately.
And it's painful. It's very painful.
There is an encyclopedia of the Holocaust. In Hebrew, 5 volumes, in English, 4 volumes. Hansi is not there at all.
She's not in the encyclopedia?
Not in the encyclopedia. Why? Because they would eliminate Yoel as well, but they couldn't because it's too well known around the world. For Yad Vashem, Yoel doesn't exist.
So if I could ask you, what message have you imparted onto your children and to the future generations? I know you've written this most incredible book, which I think any historian...
The message is too pessimistic, and I'm not going to tell you now.
Okay, well, what I am going to do is I'm going to thank you, because I think your parents, Danny, Joel, and Hansi, they were unsung heroes. They really are.
I know, and everything is done to. My father wrote it in his book that since those who wrote the history of the Holocaust did speak the truth. I don't know, translate it. It's difficult for me to translate it in English. So they warned those who really made the effort to save Jews to tell them, if you open your mouths, we will
silence.
We will make you untrustworthy and
to distort in a way.
Yes, deliberately.
So this book, Trapped by Evil and Deceit, the story of Hansi and Joel Brand, I think any historian, or not only any historian, anyone who's interested in the truth about two really unsung heroes. Your parents were remarkable. The sacrifice that they did it's just incredible what they did. And they should be given the recognition. And I think from you hearing it from the son, from a survivor, I think you've done such a tremendous service to future generations and to anybody who sees this.
We haven't dealt with this issue. Joel Palgi, the paratrooper, was caught in our flat.
Yeah. He was one of the three paratroopers
who came to save me, or he risked me. Those who claim to be the Jewish underground, the fathers who wrote about what they did in the war, said we fought for our lives. The second generation make a meeting in the Palmach building here in the vicinity about their underground, and they describe it as underground that came to save the Jews of Hungary. No, they came to save themselves, and they risked the Jews of Hungary. And they used the Jews of Hungary for their protection. They hid under my bed, and they claimed about they came to save me. They fought against recognizing my parents as Jewish saviors. When I came there, what are you doing here? Your parents don't belong to the underground.
Well, I must mention in your book, Daniel, you and your brother were the surviving sons of your parents, and you've been researching the Hungarian Holocaust for more than 20 years.
No, less than 30, since 2000, 25 years ago.
Previously, you were the scientific attaché for the State of Israel, a senior advisor in Israel's Department of Defense, and a researcher at Israel's Atomic Energy Commission. Early in your career, you served as Lieutenant Colonel in the Israeli Defense Force.
That's right.
So such a distinguished career. And you know what I found amazing, that you have served this country exemplary, with distinction.
Best, like my parents, I did my best to save this country and this nation and the Jewish people, because I was expecting, I had the feeling that the Holocaust is not the final word. We still have to rethink our behavior.
Well, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. This has been, there's 8 million, there's no words. They're really on it.
I hope you make a good use of it, and I hope to get a copy.
Absolutely, and I want to show, if you can talk about these two pictures, these original pictures.
were made by someone who became famous later. I can't.
This is a picture in 1945.
Yes, it's written there. I was at the age probably of 5 at that time, because it's summer. Seems to
Do you remember sitting for the picture?
Yes, I still remember carrying the hose. It was a discussion. I don't sit there without the hose.
And here's a picture of your brother.
A long story. Once I was told that, what are you doing here? Your parents were not part of the underground. I contacted the committee who was doing this, practically the head of this committee, and I supplied him with plenty of documentation. And after 2 years after that event that I mentioned, he managed to overcome the opposition of many members who opposed any mention of Yoel, and it became even more remarkable when after the ceremony of distributing these documents, it was decided with the Israeli radio that they will interview someone, and they insisted on having someone else, not me. But the head of this organization, the Bnei Brit, insisted that it will be me, because I was the only one who is really a Holocaust survivor, and the only one who got 2 documents. And
Both parents?
Yes. So I tell the story about the 1941 deportation. The reporter cut me at the end, and he told me, you know that there are other opinions, and cut the microphone. So these are deliberate intention to erase them from history.
But you know what B'nai Brit did, and the organization to Jews Saving Jews, they've certified both your parents, and it's a tremendous recognition which they so deserve.